Have you ever had that uneasy feeling when someone from your past walks back into your life and suddenly everything you thought was settled starts to glow with danger? It was back when the internet still smelled new and college corridors felt like a map of second chances. I was in junior college trying to balance classes and rent, so I moved in with my girlfriend, Lucy, to save money and share late-night noodles. One evening, she mentioned she'd invited a friend over from class for game night. Fine by me. I liked company, and it turned out to be the kind of night that sits in your chest. Laughter over bad jokes, dice clacking, pizza boxes piling up. Her friend, Sarah, turned out to be someone I vaguely knew from high school. Polite, quick with a smile, the sort of person who slides into a living room and makes it warmer. Sarah came again and again. Dinners, movie nights, late study sessions, and we welcomed her easily. She brought her boyfriend a few times, Jay, and I remember thinking at once that he didn't belong in the little orbit we had built. He was quiet in the wrong way, the kind of quiet that pushes people away instead of drawing them in. He'd stand by the door, arms folded, like a visitor who hated being a guest. We all made room for him because that's what you do for someone you care about. Then one night she called Lucy, crying. She told us Jay had started accusing her of things she never did. He shouted, he cursed, he shoved her when she tried to leave, and she fell, hit a coffee table, and later showed Lucy a bruise that made my blood run cold. Sarah cried and swore it had never happened before. She called it an accident, but I couldn't accept it. I wanted to punch a hole through the wall. I wanted to make him taste fear. I'm not a violent man. I've never been in a fight. But I did feel that old, raw thing. If you mess with my people, you'll learn what it means to lose what you thought you owned. I paced that night, replaying the shove like a frame that kept stopping on the worst moment. I imagined confronting him, making him feel small and ashamed. But the plan that rose in me took a different route. It wasn't fists I thought of. It was leverage. See, at the time I worked in the college's admin building. It was a quiet job, data entry and student help, where I could pull up records, class lists, fees, IDs, things most students never saw. And when revenge finds a mind that can read records, it shapes itself into something clinical, surgical, and terribly effective. I opened the student system, found Jay by name, scanned his classes, and noticed things that made a plan click into place. He paid course fees for classes that required special enrollment. He was a foreign student with a minimum unit requirement to stay in the country. I felt both cold and sharp, like a man balancing guilt and purpose. If Jay could assault a woman and walk off to class like nothing happened, perhaps a reminder that actions have consequences could be arranged without a single bruise being added to the ledger. I lay awake that night thinking about last days to add or drop classes, about phone lines set aside in the admin office for enrollment calls, about the small bureaucratic switches that could become a giant lever in the right hands. The thought of him sitting in a classroom he didn't belong to, arguing with a teacher who held the roster in his hand, the imagining of the slow, humiliating unraveling made my chest finally unclench. I promised myself I would do what needed to be done to make him feel the absence he had given someone else. Once a plan moves from a thought to a shape, it begins to pull you into its orbit. I won't pretend I slept easy. I didn't. I spent days watching small details. When Jay came around, how he behaved, whether anyone confronted him, whether Sarah mentioned going to the police. She never did. She told Lucy she thought he'd be ashamed and that he might apologize, that maybe the fear would sober him. I knew better. The administrative system at school felt like a map of faults you could exploit. Drop dates, course fees, enrollment rosters. You could make someone invisible in plain daylight if you knew which switches to throw. The last day to add or drop without penalty was approaching, the kind of deadline that makes people scramble and the kind of deadline an untraceable hand can exploit. I switched between guilt and determination, remembering that every time I paid part of the rent or loaned a hand, I had not done it for recognition. I had done it because we look out for people we love. I could justify my action as protection. That is how we comfort ourselves when crossing lines. On the day I decided to act, I went into work early. The building was quiet at dawn, the kind of quiet that sharpens your senses. There was a phone set aside for enrollment calls, a relic from days before online systems took over. I picked up a paper list, cross-checked Jay's student ID, and rehearsed the few administrative phrases I'd need. I made the calls as if I were a flustered parent or a student in a hurry, clipped sentences that masked deliberate intent. Piece by piece, I removed his registered classes. Where I could, I added classes with mandatory fees, the ones that would turn into debts if left unpaid. I moved with the calm of someone who knows exactly which domino to tip. I didn't scream or gloat. I simply did what would make his life awkward in a way the world notices. He'd be on the wrong side of official rosters and drowning in unexpected fees. If he was going to threaten and shove, he would now face consequences, measured and merciless in their bureaucracy. Leaving the office, I felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. I had no illusion that this would be painless, but I believed it to be cleaner than a fistfight. A lesson administered without blood. I told myself this was for Sarah, for any woman who had to endure his temper. But as the hours passed, and the first missed call appeared on Lucy's phone from someone in Jay's circle, a second feeling crept in. What if I'd misjudged the line between justice and cruelty? The payoff, for the first time, was not instantaneous. It was a slow burn, the sort of revenge that simmers in classrooms and offices rather than crackling on asphalt. I went home that night and tried to sleep, but images of rosters and wait lists and the polite confusion of a teacher reading the official roll chased me. I knew I'd set something in motion that would be visible to everyone who ever mistook kindness for weakness. There's a strange calm that settles in when you cross a line you can't step back over. The day after I changed his schedule, I watched the world move like nothing had shifted. Students laughing in hallways, professors sipping coffee, the soft hum of printers in the admin office. Nobody knew what I had done. Nobody suspected a thing. And yet, deep inside me, something was shifting. I kept picturing Jay waking up, getting ready for class, not knowing that the ground under him had already been quietly pulled away. I imagined him walking confidently into a room he thought he belonged in, only to learn the system didn't see him anymore. It wasn't anger now. It was anticipation mixed with a subtle, sharp guilt that pricked at the edges of my thoughts. I tried to focus on work, but every beep from a student card reader, every conversation about class schedules around me echoed like confirmation. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was orchestrating consequences. By the time afternoon hit, I had created a quiet storm around him. Dropped courses, waitlisted replacements, fees triggered, his entire academic footing rearranged like a puzzle someone had scrambled. I felt like I had turned a key in a lock that he never even knew existed. When I got home, Lucy didn't notice anything unusual about me, and that almost felt eerie. She talked about dinner, about assignments, about a show she wanted to watch. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about how fragile normal life can be, how easy it is to tilt someone's world when they think they're safe. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It felt like justice disguised as bureaucracy. No shouting, no threats, no fists, just paper cuts made sharp enough to bleed a future. And that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, tomorrow he finds out. The next day arrived with a quiet heaviness, like the world holding its breath. I didn't go looking for updates. I didn't have to. They found me. Around midday, Lucy's phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. He showed up to class today, but something happened. My pulse kicked up, but I pretended to keep typing on my computer like I hadn't seen the notification. A few moments later, another message came, and now Lucy was reading out loud, almost confused. Sarah says he wasn't on the class list. The professor checked. He argued. They asked him to leave. I kept my face still, my breathing calm. Inside, a rush, not joy, but a powerful, unsettling satisfaction. The vision I'd imagined was real now. He stood there in front of everyone, insisting he belonged, while the system coldly disagreed. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just denies your existence with a line of text and a missing name. And then came the part that caught me off guard. Sarah wrote that she felt relief. Relief not to sit next to the man who had hurt her. Relief not to pretend. Relief to breathe. My jaw unclenched a little. It felt like I had done something more than hurt someone. I had removed a shadow from someone's life. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because humiliation is only the first act of real consequences. After class, someone must have pulled Jay aside and explained reality to him. Fees owed, enrollment gone, no more student status guaranteed. For a foreign student, that isn't just a problem. That's a clock ticking toward a door closing. When evening came, Lucy mentioned that Sarah hadn't seen him around campus again. And while she spoke, I sat quietly, staring into a cup of coffee gone cold, feeling two truths fighting inside me. He deserved it. Did I go too far? Revenge rarely ends when the moment hits. It stretches, it spreads, it waits in silence. Days passed, and the aftershocks began. Lucy mentioned in passing that Jay wasn't returning Sarah's calls. Then a rumor floated through campus. Someone said he'd withdrawn. Someone else claimed his visa status might be in trouble. None of it confirmed, all of it whispered. And every whisper felt like a thread tied back to me. I hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't yelled, hadn't even confronted him. But I had dealt a blow that reached deeper. When I walked through the campus quad, sunlight hitting benches and backpacks and lazy morning chatter, I wondered if justice is supposed to feel clean, or if it always leaves you with traces of the same weight the other person once gave you. Meanwhile, Sarah looked lighter. The fear that used to flicker in her eyes had dimmed. She smiled more, sat more comfortably, spoke freely. Watching her find peace made something in me ease, like a knot finally loosening. But then came the guilt again, sharp, unexpected. Had I taken more from him than he took from her? He shoved, he scared, he bruised. I dismantled his life. One moment of violence from him, weeks of consequences from me. That balance haunted me. But whenever doubt rose, so did another memory. Her shaking voice, her tears, the bruise she showed Lucy. There are men in this world who break women and walk away whistling. I wasn't going to let one of them keep walking. And still, some nights, lying awake, I heard a quiet question echoing inside me. Was this justice, or did I become something else to deliver it? It wasn't only about him anymore. Now it was about what came after. Secrets don't sit still. They shift and breathe and remind you they exist. I found myself flinching a little when my office phone rang. I scanned student requests nervously, wondering if someone had caught the stray digital trail. Nobody had. I made sure of that. But guilt loves inventing ghosts. Sometimes, walking past the admin desk, I'd see advisors arguing with students about fees and schedules, and I'd wonder if somewhere Jay was having the same conversation, frustration spilling from him, confusion rising. But guilt wasn't the only companion. Fear marched beside it. Not fear of punishment, fear of exposure. If Lucy ever knew, if Sarah ever guessed, if Jay ever connected dots, revenge is powerful, but anonymity is protection. One night as Lucy made pasta in the kitchen, humming, beautiful in the simplicity of just existing, I realized why I was afraid. Because I didn't regret it. Not really. And there's something dangerous about that. When you hurt someone who deserved it, and you don't feel shame, only calculation, you start to wonder what else you're capable of. I wasn't planning on anything more. This wasn't who I was meant to become. But still, the reflection in the mirror had changed. A man who had never thrown a punch, had learned that some wars are fought in silence, and won without ever raising a hand. Sarah stopped by one evening. Not planned, just one of those visits where someone appears because they need a space that feels safe. She talked about trying to move on, trying to rebuild her sense of trust. She didn't mention Jay by name at first, like his presence was fading from her vocabulary. But eventually she sighed and said, "He disappeared. He dropped everything." Lucy hugged her. I just listened. And then she said a sentence that hit me harder than I expected. "I guess the world handled it." I sat frozen. She didn't know. She had no clue that the world she credited was just a phone call and a student ID number away from my hands. For a second, I wondered if I should tell her, if confession could cleanse me. But then I saw her face. Peaceful, relieved, proud of surviving. And I knew the truth would not heal her. It would only rewrite the story. Instead of being free because she stood up for herself, she would feel free because I intervened. No, she deserved her own power. I would not steal that from her too. So I nodded and quietly replied, "Sometimes people get what they earn." She smiled weakly. I felt my heartbeat echo in my ears. Revenge doesn't always need applause. Sometimes the greatest justice is silence. There came a moment, only one, when I could have undone everything. The window was brief, a simple call to the registrar with his ID, a fake apology about dropping classes by mistake, a chance to rewind fate before it fully closed around him. I stood in the admin hallway, phone in hand, dial half pressed. The ethical voice whispered, "Fix it." A shove doesn't deserve a life derailed. But another voice, deeper, harder, ancient, whispered louder, "Men who raise hands today, raise fists tomorrow. You stopped that future from happening again." And I thought about every headline where someone says, "We saw signs, we heard warnings, and we did nothing." I put the phone down. Justice doesn't always feel warm. Sometimes it feels like choosing the colder road because the alternative leaves someone else to bleed later. I didn't save him. I didn't regret it. Lucy's laughter filled our home as semesters rolled by. Assignments turned to exams, and seasons changed like a slow exhale. We eventually drifted apart, not because of this. Life simply has a way of moving people to different corners of the map. Sarah faded too, a holiday text here, a memory there. And Jay? He became a ghost story in my mind. Sometimes I checked the system months later, saw no classes, no fees, nothing but a blank academic footprint. Maybe he transferred, maybe he went home, maybe he learned what it feels like to lose control the way he tried to take it from someone else. Pain has a way of teaching. But every so often, when campus sidewalks glowed orange under late evening sun, I remembered that moment, her tears, his shove, my decision, and felt something settle in my chest that was not pride, not guilt, but a quiet truth. Some battles choose you, and you answer because silence would break you more than action ever could. Years have passed. And sometimes I still ask myself one question. Did I punish a man, or did I interrupt a monster before he grew into something worse? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Revenge isn't clean. Justice isn't gentle. And life doesn't always offer clear heroes or villains. Only moments where you decide who you refuse to be. He hurt someone I cared about. I protected her the only way I could. And if I could go back, knowing what I know now, I would still make the call. But I'll leave you with a thought that lingers with me even today. When someone you love is hurt, and the world looks away, would you stay silent, or would you become the consequence they never saw coming?